you talking to? What are you trying to prove to everyone else? Who is superior? How is your vision clearer than anyone else? Your head's in the sky, in flight, but you will crash and burn. But you will crash it!
Welcome to Agency Land, a podcast about advertising ambition and the lies we tell ourselves to survive both. Which the first time I said, I realized how grim that sounds, but I guess that's a little bit about me. So this is our survival guide. Gavin, even though I've known you for a long, long time, I think it's nearly 20 years, I actually went back through and just tried to work out your career chapters. And to be honest, I've never seen somebody with so many LinkedIn experience entries. But I kind of broke it down into 3 chapters. And the big ones that I kind of stood out to me were the ones that were most relevant were like IBM, Creator, SAP, and now, of course, Disruptors Co. Is that how you see it? Do you see your life in those chapters? Do you see it as one big blur? How do you see it?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's interesting to hear that reflected back, first of all, because it's interesting. I just had another chat last night with a friend of mine, and he was reflecting also back on just life chapters and what does that look like. And I think what's kind of interesting is before I even got into the world of work, I'd already had a couple of different little mini chapters. I left school, I studied accounting at first. It was boring, and I worked full-time as an accountant, and it wasn't really my vibe. And I got to a crisis point pretty quickly going, what am I doing with my life? I need to readjust. And I kind of thought that I'd always wanted to be a journalist. So I thought I'd study journalism or comms or something like that. So I threw in that job, went to university full-time, and just threw myself into that and immersed myself in that world. Found out that I actually loved writing, and but it didn't need to be journalism. It could be the study of literature, it could be whatever. But I ended up in performance and theatre, and that really started to drive a different way of thinking about work. And so when I ended up in the world of publishing after that, I was in this big systemic legal publishing world, but I learned the craft of editing, of producing, of publishing, right when everything was changing, right when almost like where we are now, with disruption taking place under our feet. And so everything felt like it was shifting, but I was new and I didn't have experience, so I would just break things all the time. That move fast, break things. That was me, and I broke everything in front of me, including my own job roles, right? So I kind of had to make it up as I went, and I ended up moving quickly into desktop publishing, into web publishing, into technology, which is where I ended up at IBM. And then I realized that things like IBM, when you're working at scale in big projects, that you can't just stay in your lane. You have to be into the business, into the development, into the strategy, into the numbers, into the team building, into the motivation, into the performance, into the outcome and delivery. So that IBM job was the one that brought all the fun things together in a new way.
And would you say that's the through line, that you want to get deep across everything and be a part of it? Like, you're definitely not an overseer, you're not a supervisor, you need to know everything. Is that the through line, or is publishing and making things the through line?
Good question again. I think the through line is problem solving. So really, when I look at this, I want to find ways of doing, not only for me to do things better, but also to allow other people to do things better, to stand on the shoulders of giants. And I think that's where I've always loved working, is and again, working with a lot of young people through the years, finding people who want to try something new, they're my crowd, right? So finding those folks, helping them experiment, bringing a layer of support or maybe expertise sometimes, but even just helping to de-risk what does that look like for you, so that you can try it and fail and it doesn't kill you. Because I did the tried it, failed it, and almost destroyed my career at various different points in my life because I didn't have that support around me. So I think I kind of like to
Yeah.
build that support underneath, so that you can try things, and then when it doesn't work, I'm still here and I can still help, and we can think about things in a different way.
There were two things you said just then. The first one was around breaking rules or breaking things. I imagine that IBM taught you one set of rules, and then you moved to Creator, which is an experience agency, and at that time was one of the very first digital agencies. What did so what did IBM teach you versus what did Creator teach you? And then to move on somewhere like SAP, which, to be honest, I don't know if many people would know what that is anymore, considering they were one of the huge powerhouses, and now they barely get a mention.
Yeah, it was funny because when I ended up at IBM, I had I think I had four different jobs at IBM. I kept sort of leapfrogging into new things. So sometimes people really liked it, that I was able to pick up new things and run, and sometimes they really didn't like it, and they were the blockers, and you'd end up with problems. But I was able to escalate pretty quickly by being, understanding one, the system and how IBM worked, so that I had that great mindset. But I also knew that I needed to get stuff done, so I needed to find ways around the roadblocks or the procedures or the whatever was in place, because of the impact, the outcomes for the business were really important. So I was kind of again a problem solver, I guess. So I can remember running like intranet servers under my desk, like literally that sort of thing at IBM, and
Yeah.
people were like, "How are you doing this?" I'm like, "There's a server under my desk," and they're like, so that, like we tried to do this over 3 or 4 years and we couldn't get it done.
What did IBM think of you? A little upstart? Did you
Upstart.
annoy people? Did you like, what was your attitude back then?
A bit of all those things. I really understood the systemic approach they were trying to take,
Yeah.
and I had great opportunities. And there is no doubt that being able to work on big global projects or lead new things into Asia Pac was a lot of fun. But what they taught me was, one, they build systems, and they build systems so that the scale is repeatable and the impact is long lasting. And then the second thing they taught me was to structure it with business cases and go to market strategy, which was also important. And then the third one was that they could use that scale to deliver impact. And I guess that's one of the things that is really interesting about IBM, is they feel like they're big and monolithic and don't move very fast. But when you're in the business units, when you're making things up, when you're creating new frameworks, they get behind you if they believe in you. And so it was a great learning platform in that way.
Did it teach you to grow up a bit in terms of, great, be
Totally.
creative? Yeah, be creative, but my God, this better have a real business impact.
Oh yeah, yeah, and there was some pretty spectacular failures along the way. I remember presenting at a Macquarie University showcase with one of the general managers at IBM at the time,
Mm.
and my fabulous technology that I had been working on with a team of people and so on failed spectacularly in front of a room full of people. And I remember the GM looking over at me and just going, "I'm going to kill you." And it was something like, we couldn't get the sound working or something like that.
Something like that, as we've just had. So if anyone notices, I've literally put Gavin in a store closet by the look of it. That was once a nice room. I've just seen the background behind you. The second thing you mentioned were you nearly lost your job a few times, and I've never asked you this. Have you ever been fired?
I've been made redundant. Yeah, I was made redundant from SAP.
How did that make you feel? What did that do? You've clearly had lots of really good successes, and you've built a career out of breaking things. What was it like being made redundant at that point in your career? Because you would have been, what, like a fair way into it at that point.
Yeah, I would have been. It was probably my most senior enterprise role, and I was working on a global team. I had responsibilities for Asia Pac, or APJ as they called it.
Yeah.
and it kind of came out of the blue because we had done such good work for 2 or 3 years in a row.
Yeah, wow.
And I remember we had sales targets that were, first year it was like achieve 100%, so we achieved 101. And then the second year it was like, okay, do 120. It was like, so we did 120. And then the third year they came back and they said, so we don't want you to do, we're not going to ask you to do more, we just want you to do the same again. So do 120. I was like, hang on a second.
Yeah.
And we did. We pulled out all stops and that sort of thing. But then we got to the end of that, and they're like, actually, we don't need that anymore. I was like, what? What don't you need? And what I realized, or what I found, eventually, was the result wasn't performance oriented at all. It was just politics.
Wow.
And so we're on the bad side of history, shall we say?
Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up in a space where I thought I was at the top of my game, and then find that I'm not.
What did that feel like? Like like you got 2 kids, you had to go home, you had to have that conversation. What were the feelings?
It was, first of all, surprise, but it was, I must admit, it was handled so well. Even my boss's boss, who was firing us all, was being made redundant as well, and he had to tell us all. So,
There's a camaraderie in that, though.
and I can remember sitting there going, I can't believe this is happening, but also, oh my God, this is happening. But that, like you said, it's a very adult conversation, but it was held so super well, and there was no coming back from it. Like there wasn't a, we'll find you a new spot or whatever. Like clearly we'd gone down a path that they someone didn't like at a very high level,
Yeah,
and
interesting.
so we're being made redundant, and that means that the role is not going to be replaced, right? So I guess and luckily, I'd been there a few years and I had a fairly decent redundancy package. So the transition was, first of all, the fear of having no money and being having those sorts of concerns was allayed a little bit. And the second one was, well, what do I do now? Do I want to do more of this? And so what I kind of resolved was, if I have to make quick decisions here, I'm going to double down on myself, and I'm going to use this money and time to learn where maybe I've gone wrong, or what I didn't achieve, or what, if it was political, maybe I need to work on my engagement. But I don't think it was, to be honest, I don't think it was me.
Yeah, like it's you're not the abrasive one in the room, and we've spent a lot of time in rooms together. You're not the one who has to be right. You're not the one who's telling other people that they're wrong. So that's surprising, and I can't believe in this length of time I've never actually asked you about the end of that conversation, but that's a big one. Taking a step back to the other rules, you, after IBM, was Creator, is that right? And Creator being one of those first digital and CX agencies. What were the rules of that game you had to learn? Because that's a very different size, scale beast to IBM.
Yeah, really different. And to be honest, I was feeling a little bit worried about. I called it relevance deprivation, because you go from a big company to a little tiny company, and they weren't tiny. They had 300 staff around the world, and even in the creative studio where I was, we had maybe 30, 40, 50 people. So it wasn't teeny tiny, but I was used to having 300 people on the same floor
Yeah.
as.
Another
So
magnitude, like multiple magnitude.
yeah. So I was a little bit concerned about that, but within the velocity at which Creator worked, within days, I was flying to Chicago, or I was flying to Hong Kong, or something crazy like that, and it was all meaty projects. So it was a mindset shift that things don't happen slowly; they happen fast. That decisions are made, on a phone call. Then the phone call is made, and they look over the top of the laptop and look at you and go, "Get your passport." Like so that was kind of exciting as well, because the decision making speed was so much faster. But also I was going from B2B to B2C, and
Yeah.
it was like a compression of what are the best things that I can know from B2B, like how do we know data, how do we know process, how do we know quality controls, all those sorts of things, and then how do we scale technology, to B2C, which was kind of felt like the world of cowboys. So, and creativity. We had literally hand artists, hand illustrators that could draw out any idea that you had. So, I remember being in brainstorming sessions, and I'd start drawing things on the whiteboard, and the guys would just say, "Step away from the whiteboard, and you just speak," and then they would just draw stuff and be like, "That's my idea, but it's so much better." So
Yeah, interesting. Like learning a different side to your own creativity, moving from copy into voice really, and then realizing
into
that other
voice.
people can actually take shape. Whereas
That's
maybe at IBM, you felt like what's that meme where big
I was the
birds
most
sitting
creative
at the
person in the
desk?
room.
Probably
Then
on
you're
the
in trouble.
floor, if not the building, right?
Yeah.
So did you break rules at Creator?
Oh, all the time. But it was also, it was kind of an interesting one because even though it was a small company, there was lots of autonomy. So, I had a lot of leeway. So I felt like most of the time while I was there, as long as we delivered for the client outcomes, we were able to do a lot of creative things in between. So we launched happymeal.com as it became
Yeah, wow.
an engagement platform. So, we started off with a terrible server running Java, and then ended up with something that was really funky running games and leaderboards and all sorts of cool stuff going on. But even winning over the technology guys, I could only do that on the McDonald's side. I could only do because I'd been at IBM and I could bring in the IBM talk and talk tech when
So
we
you,
needed
you were
to.
you were the gravitas. You were the business guy,
The
the
safe,
creative team.
yeah,
Yes, it's the
yeah.
safety cat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I'm breaking things, but I'm breaking things for the right reasons now, I guess.
And if we think about like IBM to Creator to SAP, like was there a person or was there a boss or a mentor that you had, even a rival that you thought you carried their influence or that they guided you through it? Like who did you look up to through those leaps? Because they're just massive leaps of company, of scale, of yourself, I imagine as well.
Yeah, there was a great guy in my first, interesting project at IBM called Owen Raymond, and he was a sales guy. And I remember he came to our whole team and he was giving a presentation on this work that he was doing. And I was sitting there and I was like, this is really interesting. And I feel like he's selling me something, but I don't know what I'm being sold. And I remember just so distinctly this thing. I thought he's really smooth, but he wasn't smarmy. Like he was just like very authentic. And I was like, this is cool. And so I went to my boss afterwards, and because he literally said at the end, if anyone's interested in learning more, you know, speak to your boss and come and see me. So I went over and saw my boss and said, that was really interesting. I'd love to have a follow-on conversation, whatever that is. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
it sounds interesting. And as soon as I spoke to him, he said like, so this is great because I was hoping you were going to give me a call. I said, why don't you just say, hey, meet with me afterwards? He's like, that's not the way it works.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like,
And what did he say after that? Like what was the relationship? What did it become? What did you seek out in Raymond?
So he was responsible for new technology solutions in that were already existing somewhere in IBM and needed to be brought to Australia. So I had this opportunity to go to the US, work with a startup, bring their technology back and try and frame it up as a business here. So I worked with him on that. So we went everywhere. We spoke to all the big media players. We spoke to heads of technology, heads of business. We went to News Corp and Sydney Morning Herald, and back then it was the Trading Post.
I remember the
But
trade.
all these folks, and they had no idea about technology. So it opened lots of doors, but it also opened doors into the way that IBM thinks, and what they were what they kind of were pretty good at championing was a technology that could change things, but they needed an anchor or a champion around who they could build that business around. And so I had that opportunity to be that champion for them. So build a business from nothing, or from a bunch of code and some books and and some manuals and stuff. And I had that a couple of times. And the other one was literally when I was in the US as well. The head of IBM Interactive was a guy called Kurt Uline, and he's like, we're out at dinner. He's like, it's great to have you here, blah, blah, blah. I've got this thing I want to talk to you about tomorrow. I'll show you. I'll organize some meetings for you. But what I want you to do is I want you to take that back to Sydney for us. And I was like, really? Me? And he's like, yeah. And I said, I would love to, but why? Why? And he said, this is what we do. This is what we do. And I was like, ah, that's interesting. Like, this is what we do. Like, we do this deliberately on purpose with a plan, but it's down to you. Like,
Yeah.
we'll give you all the support we can, but, you're going to have to make it work.
And what did that teach you? Did that teach you to break those structures from the IBM that kept you safe here into trusting yourself? Or did it kind of teach you more the connection between, technology is still people at the end of the day, and whether you can sell it in or not? Like, I think there was a great quote, which is, AI can do all these amazing things, but leaders aren't buying into it. People whose status are being criticized aren't doing it. And for most of us, we just don't have enough time to work out actually what it does for us. Or were there more like emotional lessons they taught you about who you were and how you operated in an environment like that?
Yeah, I think it was opening my eyes because I always thought that someone knew more than I did. And what I kind of realized was that everyone makes it up as they go, even if they've been making it up for their entire lives. They have better experience, or they have more comfort or levels of risk around the way that they like to work,
Yeah.
and they're comfortable working in that difficult space.
Yeah. I quite honestly, just even thinking about it now, I think that's probably the first lesson you taught me when we sat down, which is, I think social media had just happened, which is really dating me right now. But it was like, don't worry, everyone's making it up as they go along. Just we call that innovation in some areas and creativity in other, but for you, it just feels like it's about you. What was you've now founded Disruptors Co. Which again, if we think about the world being disrupted, it's probably never been bigger than right now, with technology again leading the way. What has founding your own consultancy / agency / tech firm really taught you as an individual?
I think the main thing is being able to both lead and follow. There is a certain amount of stuff you can push. There's a certain amount of things you can manage, but you can't do that by yourself. You can't. I guess this is part of that agency piece. Is sure, we could build a whole bunch of AI agents that are going to sit behind us, and Gavin's got like this powerful army of people behind him, but the people are not real. You can do that. You can certainly build that front piece, but that's not. It's not kind of fun. Like the fun part is, well, for me anyway, is business, and is in the people, in making connections, in making things change. And no matter how good your technology is, if people don't want it, don't buy it, don't get behind you, don't agree with you, or don't believe in what it is you're doing, then you're not going to go very far. So it's like, how do you bring, if you've got something great, how do you bring people into it? How do you get them excited about it, and how do you together grow that?
And when you're talking to your customers and your clients who say, "Hey, Gavin, we want to get disrupted," what's the biggest pitfall they're always not realizing is right in front of them?
Generally, people love ideas, right? And ideas are great, but they are pretty easy to come up with and easy to leave. So the trick for me is always finding something that's a little bit deeper, so that you can say, this is actually something we want to grapple with, because to make an impact, like I remember, I think back in the early days when we used to all write blogs and analyze campaigns and all that sort of thing, it was a lot of fun until I realized that it's easy to poke holes in everyone else's stuff. And when you are actually the person responsible for delivering the client outcomes, and shepherding through the creative, getting the buy-in, getting the media plan in place, like the whole lot, then there's so many compromises you make along the way. So the big shift for me was to recognize that all work is hard work, that to get it through and shepherd that process, to get something live in front of anyone else, it's an accomplishment right there. So don't go saying, oh, you did a crap job, or this was not great, or whatever. It's like, you did the best that you could at the time, and you got through the people that you had to deal with, and it's in market. And hey, what else have you done?
Because there's something you once told me, is that ideas are cheap. And
Uh-huh.
I think if we think about the thing that I used to hold true, which was like ideas are valuable and should be protected at all costs, and you don't let anyone touch them. I've never become more unconvinced of that in the last 5 years than ever before, because ideas come and go. A lot of people have them, but it's about speed, it's about structure, it's about scale, it's about do you have the perseverance to get through it. Somebody else said to me about agency land is that you either burn out or you tap out. Do you think the same is in disruption and innovation? Like, does it have that same allure, but nobody really knows what they're in for?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Over the years, we've seen these agencies turn into digital agencies, turning into like semi-systems integrators, or transformation agencies, and then back to agencies. And it's like this constant cycle, almost like you get the outsourcing thing. We're going to outsource all of our creative or our advertising or all of our marketing to agencies, and then we're going to bring it all back in. And then, so these pendulums swing and change. But being able to navigate what that disruption looks like as the pendulum swings is because the work still needs to be done, right? It needs to be done by someone, and it needs to look to your client base or your customer base like nothing has changed. Yeah. And yet, you're getting rid of an agency, you're bringing in a new one, you're doing all. There's change management, there's new staff, there's new CMO, blah blah blah. And the same happens in innovation as well. It's just that when you're in the agency world, innovation looks different to when you're in a technology world. Yeah. I remember doing for Creator, we'd do these innovation days for our client base, and we would spend a month building out, finding the best toys with the new technologies, with laser eyes or things that would be barcode readers that would then take that turned into data and then move a little toy around a track or something. Like, that innovation was fun, but it was still innovation, it was still creative. But in technology world, innovation looks and smells different, but the human instincts about why we're attracted to it and why it's shiny and why we think it's interesting and useful, those motivations are still the same.
Yeah, and we just don't apply it to discovering toy innovations, because we think of them as toys and therefore not worth the status that we give all these things, because technology is in the news, it's in the AFR, it's wherever it might be.
Well, you even just think back on the toys that you loved when you were a kid, and then think of what you love about the latest thing you've got now, and there's probably the same thing.
Yeah, probably not too far off. When I was going through your resume and your career, it is a consultant who has a agency moment. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think so.
What mark did it leave on you from an agency point of view? Like, what role did the agency part in particular play in the rest of your career so far?
So I think the thing that I liked about agency life is the variety. And I kind of feel like you do a couple of different things. So you work in-house, you consult, or you go agency. And then maybe you do the other way around and you swap in and out. So the thing that's really great about being on the client side is that you get to own the outcomes, and that is an impact. But on the agency side, you can come up with the ideas, like you said, you come up with plenty of ideas, and you can test them all out, and it's not your job on the line in the same way that it is if you're the client. And so I think what I love about agency world is that you have so many things coming at you, different clients, different needs, different challenges, different markets, different creative approaches, and you get this tremendous variety, and you learn a lot. You learn on the fly because something flies at you. You get a client, as calling you at 4 a.m, going, "Hey, where is this? And what is that? And how's that happening?" I actually was just reflecting back on end of the year, 31st of December. Every year, I kind of just think of going live with a happymeal.com site on New Year's Eve in Australia.
Sounds like chaos. That sounds like
it's terrible,
chaos.
Right? But it's what we would do every month. Complete refresh. But there was sort of a thrill to that velocity that you don't get client side, and as a consultant, you certainly don't get that thrill of the velocity. So I think I can see why in agency world you do get burnout, because you're flying 100 miles an hour, you're learning and building and going and developing and changing all at the same time. And sometimes you need to step out, and sometimes it's fun to step back in.
What would be, let's speak straight to the heart of this podcast, which is all about survival. What is that one piece of survival advice you would give to somebody thinking about agency, or they're in their agency career, or even like me, they've been in it for too long? What is that piece of advice?
So the thing that really stayed with me was in agency world, certainly creator, was that I felt that while I had impact, while I had control, while I had a certain sense of direction, where I could influence what was going through the agency, I was happy to stay. But once I got to the point where, maybe the client relationship was different, or we'd had a new change, or maybe there was a change in creative team or creative direction or whatever it happened to be. But when my sense of my own impact or usefulness to where they wanted to go dropped out, that's when I felt like I was okay to leave. Because otherwise you do become addicted to the adrenaline of the agency world. But then by taking a step back and recognizing that the thing that drove me to perform well in that space had lost, and then I think you start to get cynical and you start to not perform at your best. Rather than letting that play out, I kind of was very keen to sort of step out of that space and then put that effort into something else.
Yeah, I think that's so true. You get addicted to the chaos, and then sometimes you can't delineate one type of chaos to another. So if it's the chaos of the speed and delivery and the unrealistic deadlines, or is it the chaos of the creativity and the speed at which you need to create and publish? They're very different things. And I think for a lot of creatives, we ask them to be so vulnerable, and then we punish them with client calls, and then they try to separate themselves between the work and the client themselves, and becomes this. Yeah, and that's where I think becoming a really good manager, a really good leader is so important to understand. Where are the creatives at? Can they deal with another client call? Because they're not account people, and they don't need to be, and we need to protect them that way. And just right now, reflecting on my own team, there are moments where I'm like, I know I'm about to put you through 2 calls, but I'm going to flag it and say, I know this is about to happen, and I know how this is going to make you feel, but this is why it's important that we do it, because I'm going to empower you to be able to ask the questions that I'm not asking, because I don't have the pixels in my hand. So I think that's absolutely gold.
Yeah, and also, it's good because you're having that. So the pre-prep and the post-prep, I think, is kind of interesting, right? Because you're going to go into a difficult call. So if you prep well with the team, then you can give them some context for what they. And it might just be that you need the creative team to show up to show that we have a creative team, right? And so, and I certainly have had a couple of those situations. So I'd always just go, okay, you've got to say something. I want you to say your name. I want you to say what you do. I want say something really simple about the work that you do for that client. Yep. And then I'm going to give you like a sentence that I want you to weave in somewhere, because I'm going to call you out at some point through the call so that your voice is heard. And then that's all we need. We don't need you to dominate the conversation. So just that little bit of coaching. And then afterwards, just getting the feedback saying that was great, or that didn't work, or try this a different way next time, and that sort of thing. Because when you've got that feet to the fire kind of conversation with a client, that where everyone feels a little bit at risk, especially on the creative side where you're putting everything into it, giving you a little bit of comfort and then a little bit of feedback, and it gives you opportunities for growth.
You spend a lot of time working with younger people, working with creatives. I think you were chairing Ignite at one point. You and I met through Coffee Mornings, which was a digital and creative meetup. You're on the B2B Marketers Leading Forum. Obviously, Awesome Foundation as well, and then ViBi, which we still sit on the board of. What's been your human cost to doing so much? I know we joke about that you don't sleep, which I then learned you don't really sleep. What's been the human cost to you doing that, or is it so rewarding that you can keep going?
I think I've always done multiple things at the same time, and what I found is that certain streams reward you in different ways, and sometimes a single thing isn't enough. So for example, just before I took my job at IBM, I was running my own little publishing company. I was teaching at a university. I was started studying for a PhD, and I was taking these movement theatre classes, and I was loving it. I was like, it was all over the place. Every single day was completely different, but I was loving it. And also I was directing theatre for a community theatre company, and so there was so much going on, and then I got to IBM, and within a week, I had turned what was like supposed to be a casual job into like a full-time gig with a team of five,
Yeah, wow.
with a new client that would just come through.
IBM was meant to be part-time.
Yeah, like casual, yeah.
Wow.
And they were like, within 2 weeks, they're like, so you're on this project, that blah blah blah. Like, it was just instantaneous. And then what I realized was that in this one job, all the things that I was getting out of everything, so the entrepreneurial piece, the creative piece, the writing piece, the performance and directing piece, the actual delivery to clients piece, all of it was all happening in one time at the same time.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so for me, I guess it was that was that high pressure, was where it was at. So when I started getting involved with things like Vibewire and Coffee Mornings and so on, I created those, or I got involved in those because they were filling a gap for me
Yeah.
that I wasn't getting, that is important to the way that I feel whole.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so important. I think so often we're guilty of thinking we are our job and we are our work, and then we neglect the things that probably used to bring us a lot of joy. Like, on a personal level, my business coach, he's like, do you like networking events? And I'm like, I used to run them. I used to host them. I
Yeah.
used to go to everyone I could. He's like, well, why don't you go to one again? And I went, I haven't even thought about it for 6 years.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And I went to one, and I walked away feeling so energized. I got in my car, like, it was, and again, I, decided not to drink that night. And I'm like, got in my car, energized, like racing with all these ideas, all this energy. And I had forgotten how good I could feel in a room full of people, because I'd
Right.
convinced myself that I was on my own, I'm running the business, and this is what I do now, and that needs my focus. And even though I thought it was going to cost me energy, it actually gave me energy.
Right.
And I'd forgotten what made me happy. And it was a real sharp point. Final question. What are you going to do next? Do you even think about that? Like, again, I've known you for a long time, and I've never asked you this. Well, what's next for you?
It's a good question. For this year, for the first time ever, I've kind of started the year not knowing what I was going to do. I feel like, well, I felt like, so I'm feeling a little bit more cohesive at the moment. But I had some health issues late last year, and I had to work through those, so it took a bit of focus and attention. And I sort of came into the year feeling better as a as a physical body, but feeling a little bit depleted creatively. So a bit like we're talking about now, sort of tapping back into those things where, like, that's where I get my energy from. That's where I get my creative from. That's where I get, uplift. And there's been a couple of things that have triggered me in a positive way. So I think it's easy when we say we're being triggered by something that we often think it's negative. So I've started looking for what are the positive triggers, and then recognizing either the trigger or the pattern that allows me to then take a next step. And so I've reconnected with building things again. So I've been doing a lot of work in building AI, and not just using ChatGPT, but building systems and building creative engines and all those sorts of things. And you and I know each other a little bit more than the listeners to your podcast. But I do a lot of physical things as well. So things like electronics, or car maintenance, or motorbikes.
Rebuilding a motorbike,
Right.
Building guitar, like I remember,
Yeah.
those projects,
Yeah. So just sort of going back and saying those things. What do they do? Because they all feed into something, and it's feeding that creative spirit. And then now actually recognizing that you don't need to do all the things at the same time. being a little bit more focused and directed and really driving towards an outcome where there is a yes at the end of the line rather than a no.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a little bit of my last month or two, is really looking at what does yes look like?
Yeah.
Why is that important to me? And then how to direct the energies into those yes things rather than the things where we're hitting brick walls.
Yeah. Absolutely love it. And I couldn't agree more. I think if anyone feels stuck, go and do more. Go and do something different. And, there are lots of, you can literally talk to Claude about what else you should do. And those models will literally help you open your mind if you don't want to talk to, or you don't feel like you can talk to anyone else about it. So, Gavin, thank you so much for spending some time with me. Sorry to put you in the closet last minute. So we'll see what AI can do there. But where can people find out more about you? Where can they find out about the things you've done, the books you've written, which I'm very glad to say I've been a part of? Where's the best place to get in contact with you if people want to learn more?
To be honest, it is LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/servant of chaos. I still have the servant of chaos moniker there. And so there, or disruptorsco.com, which is our business website. But increasingly, I'm looking for a new place. I feel like, these old digital platforms have outlived their usefulness. So I don't know what's out there, but if you're out there and you're building something new, hit me up. I'm keen.
As soon as LinkedIn gave me a fat loss ad the other day, I was just horrified. Actually, here's a bonus question for anyone who made it this far. Where did the moniker Servant of Chaos come from?
So I was my first internal client side marketing gig. I was in a small marketing team for a consulting company, and it was all going well. I was loving it. Looked at the analytics for the website and realized that there was some kind of weird, pattern of traffic that was coming through. So I went to the CEO and I said, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like someone is going to take over the business because we're getting hit up by all these private equity firms. And he just looked at me and he said, close the door. And I went, what? So I closed the door. He's like, "Yep, we're about to be bought."
Wow.
But you've actually really raised my awareness of this. And what would be great is for you to be part of the change management program. So I got to lead part of that, the comms part for the transition into one of the big global companies, and we got absorbed. And people would say to me, "How do you handle this?" And it's like, well, I just serve the chaos. I don't control it.
Yeah.
And that's where it came from. So it was my Yahoo internal messaging ID.
I don't think there's the better analogy for even working in agency land than servant of chaos. So I love that. All right. Thank you very much, my friend.
It was awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Agency Land, a Survivors podcast, is hosted and produced by me, Jai Smith, founder and head of creative and strategy at Disruptors Co. Our intro track, Crash and Burn, featuring North Lanes by Phase 1, used with the kindest of permissions from Fat Cat Music. Special thanks to Carla Munn and Jaron Norton for the art, design, and motion. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, leave us a review, and share it with somebody navigating agency life. Until then, you're good, get better, and stop asking for things.